At my sister's engagement dinner, I stood holding a champagne flute I hadn't touched. We were in our family's Greenwich home, the one filled with my mother's polished reputation. My mother, Leslie, raised her glass. The chandelier light caught in her rings. She smiled at my sister, Lisa. "A toast," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "To the daughter who actually made something of her life." The guests clapped. Lisa laughed. Then my mother turned to me. Her smile vanished. "And to the one who didn't." The room went silent. Forks froze midair. Heat climbed my neck. A thick, suffocating shame. "You're a failure, Mila," she said, her voice clear and cold. "Get out." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just set my glass down and walked away. As I reached the foyer, I heard her hand the keys to the family house, keys worth $500,000 to my sister. That night, I lost my home and my family. But 3 years later, they drove past my new gate, saw my name on the plaque, and finally realized whose house it really was. Have you ever been so underestimated that it became your only fuel? If you have, you know exactly what comes next. Growing up in Greenwich, our family looked perfect from the outside. We were a postcard of suburban success. White fences, charity dinners that my mother, Leslie, chaired with military precision, and a manicured lawn that she called our reputation. She spent more time tending to that lawn and what the neighbors thought of it than she ever spent with me. Inside that house, everything revolved around appearances. My mother was the kind of woman who cared more about country club gossip than her own daughter's tears. She lived for the validation of strangers, and she demanded her children be her trophies. My sister Lisa, 3 years older and always polished, was her masterpiece. Lisa was a perfect reflection of my mother's ambitions. She was charming, ruthless in her pursuit of social status, and never, ever out of place. "Lisa will run the world someday," Mom used to say, always loud enough for me to hear from the next room. It wasn't a prediction, it was a decree. And I was the ghost, the quiet one, the disappointment. My father, Zachary, was different. He was the only one who really saw me. He was a quiet, patient man, a brilliant software engineer who'd traded his own passion for technology to make my mother happy in finance. He wore his compromise like a well-tailored suit that never quite fit. He was my only ally. My favorite memories lived in his cluttered home office. It was a small room over the garage that smelled like old books, ozone, and hot circuits. While Mom and Lisa were at galas, Dad and I would be in there, surrounded by towers of discarded hardware. He was the one who taught me to code. I'd sit on the floor, my fingers flying across a keyboard, while he leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses. "Don't just make it work, Mila," he'd say, his voice a low murmur against the hum of the servers. "Build something real." Those words became my religion. Then, my senior year of high school, he died in a car accident. And the house didn't just go cold, it became a mausoleum. My father's death broke something in my mother. Or maybe it just calcified what was already there. Her obsession with image grew sharper, more desperate, like she had to prove to the world that losing her husband hadn't shaken her control. She found it easier to love Lisa, the reflection of herself. I just became the living reminder of what she couldn't manage. My achievements were invisible. When I won a state award for a renewable energy model I'd designed, she barely looked up from her magazine. "That's a cute hobby, Mila," she'd mutter. But when Lisa won an award for a business essay, an essay I knew Dad had stayed up all night helping her write, Mom had it professionally framed and hung in the living room. Aunt Lori, Mom's older sister, was no better. She'd married into money and visited every few months to inspect our lives. She'd find me in the garage, soldering a prototype. "Still playing with all those little gadgets, Mila?" She'd smirk, sipping her expensive wine. "Maybe one day you'll grow out of it and find a proper husband." I learned to smile. I learned to stay quiet. I learned to disappear into the background before their laughter could hit too hard. For years, I believed that silence was what kept the peace. But that night, at Lisa's engagement dinner, silence wasn't enough. It proved that my quiet was never peace. It was just ammunition. I stood beside the main table, holding that champagne flute, while the chandelier above us, the one Mom always bragged was imported crystal, flickered against the gaudy gold wallpaper. I watched Mom lift her glass, give her toast, and then turn on me. "You're a failure, Mila. Get out." I remember the exact sound of the silence that followed, the clink of someone's fork hitting a plate, the intake of breath from the guest next to me. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I just walked. Through the foyer window, I saw her hand them to Lisa. The keys to the house. Our house. The house where my father taught me to build my first circuit board. The house that was half his, and therefore half mine. Watching her slip those keys into her designer purse. It was like watching them bury my father's belief in me all over again. That was the night I stopped being their quiet disappointment. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew it had to be somewhere far from them, far from the person they thought I was. The first night after that dinner, I slept in my car. It was a 10-year-old sedan, the only thing my name was on. I parked in a 24-hour grocery lot, miles away. The rain started around 2 a.m. It wasn't a soft rain, it was an angry, pounding downpour. It hit the windshield so hard it blurred the streetlights into fractured white streaks. I remember gripping the cold steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My whole body was shaking, but not from the cold. It was the humiliation, settling into my bones. I had one thought, one command I whispered to the empty car. "Don't cry. Don't you dare cry." Crying felt like something my mother would expect. It felt like defeat. So I just sat there, rigid, and watched the water wash over the glass until the sun came up. By morning, I drove to Brooklyn. I signed a lease for the cheapest studio I could find. It was a third-floor walk-up over a bodega that smelled like stale beer and frying onions. One room, one window that looked out onto a brick wall. One radiator that hissed and clanked like it was alive and angry about it. I unpacked everything I owned. A single duffel bag of clothes, my cracked laptop, and a battered folder with my old coding projects. That was it. No family photos, no furniture, no trace of the life I'd just been cut from. For weeks, I lived on instant noodles and freelance work. I took any gig I could find, small, glitchy website updates for $50, debugging someone else's sloppy code. It barely covered my bills. Every night, I'd scroll through photos of Lisa's engagement party. They were splashed all over social media. She looked radiant, of course. My mother stood beside her, champagne in hand, the caption reading, "A proud mom moment with my incredible daughter." I didn't comment. I didn't post. I just closed the tab, and I worked. One afternoon, I was nursing a single coffee for 3 hours in a crowded shop, trying to steal their Wi-Fi. I overheard two men at the next table, investors, by the sound of their suits talking about a new city grant for sustainable tech startups. Something clicked. A switch flipped in my head. I opened my laptop, ignoring the freelance gig I was supposed to be finishing. I began sketching the idea that had lived in my head since my dad's lessons all those years ago. A program that could reduce urban energy waste through adaptive solar systems. That's when I thought of Professor Melinda Jenkins, my old university mentor. She'd always believed in me, back in college when no one else cared about renewable tech. I emailed her the prototype, a clunky mess of code. I half expected silence. Instead, she replied within hours. Her email was 3 sentences long. "This is not a cute hobby, Mila. This is promising. Come see me." Her small, cramped lab at NYU became my second home. She introduced me to Misty Ramirez, a sharp-as-nails engineer with quick hands and even quicker ideas. Misty understood me in a way few people ever did. She saw the same things I did. The drive, the stubbornness, the quiet, simmering anger at always being underestimated. We clicked instantly. Misty and I became a 2-woman army. We spent nights, then weekends, then weeks in that NYU lab, our faces lit by the blue glow of the monitors. We debugged. We ran simulations. We argued about code efficiency at 3 a.m. over cold pizza. We slept under our desks between tests, waking up with keyboard marks on our faces. It was the most alive I'd ever felt. One night, Misty leaned back, rubbing her eyes. We'd been trying to crack a persistent bug for 12 hours straight. "You know," she said, her voice rough with exhaustion, "you code like you're fighting someone." I stared at the lines of code on my screen, watching the cursor blink. "Maybe I am," I told her. The program, the one we started calling Green Tech Solutions, began to take real shape. It was more than my father's lessons. It was our obsession. We built predictive models that tracked sunlight angles, weather patterns, and building energy usage across city grids. The software didn't just track it, it learned. It would automatically adjust energy flow, diverting power, optimizing storage. It was smart. It was efficient. And it worked. But survival was still a daily battle. Just as we finalized the prototype, a rent notice was slid under my apartment door. It was bright pink, but the words were printed in a stark, angry red. Final notice. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. I had 72 hours. I remember calling Misty, my voice high and thin, trying to laugh through the sheer panic. "Well," I said, "I just need one investor, before the landlord changes the locks." Professor Jenkins came through. She'd been showing our white paper to a few people, and one of them, a venture capitalist named Justin Patel, was intrigued. He was not what I expected. He met us at a coffee shop, wearing a sharp suit with bright yellow sneakers. He spoke fast, like his mind was always 2 steps ahead of his words. He didn't waste time on small talk. He watched our demo, his eyes scanning every data point on my laptop screen. He was silent for a full minute after. Then he closed the laptop, looked at me, and said, "Everyone else is trying to build the next social media app. You're solving something that actually matters." He looked at Misty, then back at me. "Let's make it real." His fund gave us $75,000. It felt like $1 billion. It was barely enough to breathe, but it was enough. Misty and I moved Green Tech Solutions out of the lab and into a small, windowless co-working space that smelled permanently of burnt coffee and old carpet. We worked 18-hour days. We lived on adrenaline and the cheap granola bars Justin sent over by the case. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the dark office window late at night. My tired face, hollow eyes, hair tied back in a messy bun. I'd whisper to that reflection, "Not a failure." Slowly, things shifted. A local grocery chain, one known for its green branding, agreed to let us test our software across 10 of their stores. They weren't expecting much. We worked around the clock, integrating our system. 6 weeks later, the results came in. Their energy bills were down 30%, not 3%, 30. The day they signed the full contract, the one that meant we could pay ourselves a real salary, I went home to my tiny Brooklyn studio. I sat on the floor, my back against the hissing radiator, and I let the tears fall. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even happy, not really. It was just proof. Hard, numerical, undeniable proof. I had the paper in my hand. I had the check in my bank account. I didn't call my mother. I didn't need her to know. Not yet. The months that followed were a blur of code, contracts, and caffeine. Green Tech Solutions was still small, just 2 women in a room full of tangled wires, but it was alive. Every client review that came in, every new email inquiry, felt like oxygen. Still, the old voices in my head followed me everywhere. My mother's dismissive, cute hobby, Mila. My aunt's condescending smirk, "You'll grow out of it." And Lisa's. Lisa's was the one that hurt the most. That sharp, cutting, "You're just jealous." Those echoes became my fuel. Every single time exhaustion threatened to crush me, every time a line of code broke for the 10th time at 4 a.m., I'd hear them again, and I'd keep typing. We hit roadblocks, of course, hard ones. Our first big contract, the one after the grocery chain, almost collapsed when a major retailer delayed their net 60 payment to net 120. Just like that. The same week, our co-working space announced a rent hike. They weren't doubling it, but it felt like it. Misty panicked. She was at her desk, head in her hands, running the numbers on our dwindling bank account. "Mila, we can't make payroll in 3 weeks. We're done." I looked at the spreadsheet, at the red number staring back at me, and I felt nothing. No panic, just cold resolve. "I've already lost everything once," I told her, my voice quiet. "Money doesn't scare me anymore. What scares me is going back. We'll figure it out." I didn't tell her I sold the last piece of jewelry I owned, a pair of earrings my father had given me to cover the gap. I just did it. One night, I stayed late, all alone, finishing a critical code update for a system audit. Misty had gone home, exhausted. Outside the single window of our tiny office, the city hummed, a low, indifferent buzz of traffic. It was the rhythm of a world that didn't care whether I made it or not. I remember looking at the screen, then at my own reflection in the dark glass. Tired, pale, but my eyes were clear. I whispered into the empty room, "Dad, I'm still building something real." That week, the shift happened. A small, niche sustainability blog, one I'd admired for years, ran a feature on us. It wasn't huge, but it was smart. It caught the attention of a local tech reporter who wanted to visit our setup. She was kind enough not to mention the burnt coffee smell or the flickering fluorescent light. She just focused on the data. When her article came out, it opened doors. Small businesses started calling. We landed a state grant. I hired 2 interns. We finally moved out of the co-working space and into a modest, second-floor office with actual sunlight and a coffee machine that didn't require a prayer. The milestones came faster after that. Partnerships, more grants. New cities were testing our product. Our name started appearing in newsletters that, a year ago, would have sent my emails straight to spam. And all the while, I kept quiet. I didn't update my family. I didn't post a single thing online. Success felt sacred. It felt fragile. It felt like a flame that would vanish if I bragged about it. Misty kept teasing me. "You know," she said, propping her feet on her new desk, "your mom's probably out there in Greenwich, pretending she's the one who discovered you." I'd just smile. Let her. I don't need her story anymore. Then came the moment everything changed. The grocery chain's national board, the real board, the ones who held the billion-dollar checkbook, invited us to present green tech at their headquarters. The boardroom was vast, glass and steel, overlooking the city. It was full of executives in dark, expensive suits. Each one held a tablet with our data already displayed. I walked to the front of the room, and as I set my laptop down, I smoothed the front of my shirt. It was a minimalist white blouse. The exact same one I'd worn to Lisa's engagement dinner 3 years ago. It felt symbolic. It felt like rewriting that night, but this time, on my own terms. When I finished the presentation, the room was silent. Then, the CEO at the head of the table started to clap. Slowly, then all at once, the room erupted in applause. The contract we signed that day meant full, unassailable financial independence. No more rent panic. No more skipping meals. No more looking over my shoulder. I was free. That evening, I didn't go back to Brooklyn. I drove back to Greenwich. But I didn't go to my mother's street. I didn't go near the house I grew up in. Instead, I bought a small, modern house on a quiet cul-de-sac. It was all glass walls, clean lines, and warm, minimalist wood, and on the roof, a full array of solar panels. The entire property ran on my software. My name, Mila, was the only one on the deed. It wasn't a look-at-me purchase. It was a boundary, a silent, self-sustaining fortress. I had built something real, and now I was going to live inside it. 3 years passed. Success didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like quiet mornings. My new normal was waking before sunrise. I'd brew coffee in my spotless kitchen and watch the light crawl across the solar panels on my roof, just as my software was routing the first wave of morning energy. The house hummed with the low, steady rhythm of its own intelligence. It wasn't just shelter, it was proof. Green tech solutions had grown beyond anything I had imagined. We'd secured major contracts across New York and New Jersey. We'd expanded our team to 20 engineers. We were negotiating with city officials for large-scale municipal implementation. Our clients were saving millions. My face appeared in a few industry interviews, but I still kept my voice measured, calm. People called me a visionary. I just called it survival. That October morning started like any other. The air was crisp, sunlight cutting sharp and clear through the red-gold leaves. I was in my home office, on a video call with Misty, planning a new energy audit for a client. My personal phone, the one I kept on the desk, buzzed. Unknown number. Same area code as my mother's. I let it go to voicemail. Misty was mid-sentence when it buzzed again. And again. On the 4th ring, I sighed, muted my mic, and stepped outside onto the patio, phone in hand. A black SUV was slowing on the street, its engine a low, expensive purr. It crept past my gate. It wasn't until the tinted window rolled down that I saw her. Lisa. Perfect hair, perfect nails, perfect abject panic. Her eyes darted between me, standing on the patio with my coffee, and the house itself, like she couldn't make the two images connect. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I just watched her. Her gaze froze. She'd seen the plaque beside the driveway. It was discreet, brushed steel, with 2 words, Green Tech Solutions. And under it, my name. Her hand, manicured and shaking, shot to her phone. I was too far away to hear her at first, but I could read her lips. Then I heard her voice. It cracked into a half scream, sharp and ugly in the quiet morning air. Mom, this house is worth a fortune. Wait, this logo, it's hers. She stared at me, her face pale. Mom, it's Mila's. She didn't wait for a reply. She jammed the car into gear and sped off, tires squealing down the quiet, respectful street. I stood still for a long time, the coffee cooling in my hands. I'd always imagined the day they found out. I thought maybe I'd feel triumph, vindication, something burning and loud. But what came instead was just quiet relief, like finally setting down a weight I'd been carrying for so long, I'd forgotten it was even there. An hour later, my intercom buzzed. A familiar voice, strained and thin, came through the speaker. Mila, it's Mom. I almost didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the ignore button. But curiosity, a cruel, calm curiosity I hadn't known I possessed, made me press talk. I buzzed her in. She stood there on my doorstep, a perfect image of Greenwich wealth. Tailored coat, makeup too heavy for a weekday morning, her hair sprayed into a flawless helmet. Time had carved new, tight lines around her mouth, but her eyes were the same, calculating. When I opened the door, her expensive perfume hit me before her words did. It was the same scent she wore the night of the engagement party. Mila, she said quietly. Her voice was soft, practiced. You've done well. I didn't reply. I just leaned on the doorframe, blocking the entrance. She looked past me, her eyes scanning the foyer, the minimalist furniture, the warm lights, the entire wall of windows that looked out onto the private garden. She was tallying it up. I could see the dollar signs clicking behind her pupils. She was assessing everything she used to worship in other people's houses, now in my house. I didn't realize how far you'd come, she continued, her voice trembling just slightly. A performance, Lisa called, and I had to see it for myself. You've seen it now, I said. My voice was even. Mila, I was wrong, she whispered, taking a small step forward. About so many things. I almost laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. The same woman who had banished me, who had called me a failure in front of a room full of people, now stood on my doorstep speaking like a guest. My mind flashed back to that night. Her voice, sharp and proud and cruel. You're a failure, Mila. Get out. The memory didn't hurt anymore. It was just a fact. I don't need an apology, Mom, I said softly. I just need peace. Her face tightened. This wasn't going to script. I want us to be a family again, she insisted, her voice gaining its old familiar edge of demand. I looked her right in the eye. We were never one. Her composure cracked. The mask fell. For the first time, she looked small, like a woman stripped of her audience, her power, her reputation, all the things she valued, more than me. You've changed, she whispered, and it sounded like an accusation. I smiled. A faint, real smile. No, I said. I just stopped asking for permission. We stood there in silence, the kind of silence that makes people face themselves. I saw her glance around again, desperate to find something to hold on to, some reason to still feel superior. But all she saw was what she'd thrown away. Finally, I stepped back. I'll let you know if I ever want to talk, I said, and I closed the door, gently. The sound of the latch clicking into place echoed through the house. It was a clean, final sound, punctuation. That night, my phone buzzed. It was Pamela, my old college friend, the one who still lived near Greenwich. She was laughing. Mila, you won't believe this, she said. Your mom's name is all over the Greenwich community Facebook group. I sat down in my office, the lights of my own house humming softly around me. What are you talking about? Someone posted about Lisa's squealing tires this morning, Pamela cackled. And the whole story is coming out. People are saying Leslie Moore's daughter owns that smart house on Elmwood, the same daughter she kicked out. She read a few posts aloud. Karma's poetic, isn't it? I leaned back in my chair, looking out the glass wall at the dark, quiet trees. I don't need sides, Pam, I said. Just silence. Word travels fast in towns like Greenwich. But in the age of social media, it travels like wildfire. Within 2 weeks, the whispers Pamela had heard became a roar. The story my mother had crafted so carefully of her 2 daughters, one a success, one a failure, was publicly rewritten. The women who used to clink glasses with her at galas now turned their heads when she walked into the country club. The gossip wasn't just about me anymore, it was about her. She called her daughter a failure, one post on the community group read, in front of everyone. And now look, that failure built the smartest house in town, and Lisa, well, Pamela called again, this time not laughing, just stunned. Mila, your sister's husband filed for divorce. It turned out Lisa's perfect life was as hollow as my mother's praise. The luxury condos she'd been flipping for quick profit, they'd tanked. Her husband, it seemed, had just discovered the mountain of debts she'd hidden from him. Karmic justice, when it finally arrives, is rarely gentle. Lisa's life unraveled with brutal speed. First, she sold her Manhattan apartment to cover the legal fees, then her jewelry, then her car. The sister who once smirked across the engagement table, the one who took the keys to my father's house without a second glance, was now moving back in with my mother, not in triumph, but in shame. Every guest who had applauded them that night now whispered behind their backs. My mother, the woman obsessed with reputation, had become a cautionary tale. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I didn't call. I just kept working. Green tech was expanding into new states. Our software was integrating with smart grids across the Northeast. Misty, officially my COO, ran operations now. Justin handled the investors. My days were long, but they were peaceful. One morning, a letter arrived. Standard white envelope, no return address. But the handwriting was hers. I opened it slowly in my kitchen. Mila, it began. The handwriting was shaky. I see now what I destroyed. I wanted to shape you into someone the world respected. I didn't realize you already were. I don't know how to fix what I've done. I'm sorry, Mom. The paper trembled in my hand. 3 years ago, these words would have saved me. 2 years ago, I would have wept. A year ago, I would have felt a surge of triumph. Now, I folded the letter neatly. I walked to the kitchen, to the gas stove, and I turned on a single burner. The blue flame clicked to life. I slid the edge of the paper into the flame. I watched the edges curl black. I watched her signature mom turn to ash and then vanish completely. The fire consumed the apology, the regret, the years of pain. It rose as heat and smoke, and then it was gone. I whispered to the empty room. Apology accepted, just not delivered. Outside, the house's automated blinds adjusted with the rising sun. Light flooded the room again, warm and forgiving. For the first time in my entire life, I felt truly, completely free. Not from them, but from needing them. My life continued. Nights were quiet, filled with the soft, steady rhythm of the solar system, shifting to night mode. Sometimes, I'd stand on the rooftop, under the panels, and I could see the faint glow of the old neighborhood lights. My mother's street. The house that used to be ours. It felt distant, fictional. One evening, about a month later, I came home to find a small envelope slipped under my door. No stamp, just my name. Inside, a single line written in my mother's hand. I lost everything trying to keep appearances. You built everything by being real. I set the note on my desk, beside a picture of me and Misty, laughing at our last product launch. I had rebuilt everything they tore down. And I did it not with revenge, but with resolve. Sometimes, silence speaks so much louder than shouting. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to love you, just to find your own peace, you'll understand. And if you're building something real, subscribe. Because your story deserves to be told.